What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Devy Royale. Today we are returning to our consensus combined rankings series. We've done a couple of these. We did quarterbacks, we did running backs, and today we are moving on to Dynasty wide receivers. Now, this is a different way of doing things because it includes Devy players. So this top 36 might omit some players that you normally see in top 36 Dynasty rankings, but this kind of gives a little bit of context to the upcoming classes where you can maybe find value in Devy leagues, but also where you can find value in some of those picks. We are going to get right into it. We're going to give you the top 36. So we're going to start here at 36. Ladd McConkey, Los Angeles Chargers. 35, Micah Hudson from Texas Tech. 34 is Deebo Samuel. 33 is Jaden Reed. 32, Brian Thomas Jr. 31, Jordan Addison. 30, Xavier Worthy. 29, DK Metcalf. 28, Rashee Rice. 27, George Pickens. 26, Zay Flowers. And 25, Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. So the main takeaways from this group: we're going to have players that don't make this list. Like you're not going to see Keon Coleman. You're not going to see Cooper Kupp. And that's because here at the Devy Royale, we do tend to lean a little bit into the younger players. So Ladd McConkey coming in at 36, we do anticipate that he'll have a lot of upside being with Justin Herbert in that offense, with a ton of opportunity. Micah Hudson's a player that a lot of college football fans are about to know as this college football, EA Sports College Football 25 comes out. He's a dynamic freshman. He's coming in. He's one of the best freshmen in the country. We love him at this channel. He's right there with Jeremiah Smith. I think if Jeremiah Smith weren't real, then Micah Hudson would be the clear number one wide receiver in this incoming freshman class. Deebo Samuel's taken a little bit of a hit. We've seen a little bit of a less production out of him. Jaden Reed is one of those projections where we think he's going to be the number one wide receiver for the Packers again. We saw his usage kind of mirror that of Deebo Samuel, so it's interesting to me that they are back-to-back in our consensus rankings. Jordan Addison coming in at 31 is a bit surprising to me. I think there's a little less upside now with J.J. McCarthy. I think you're going to get a bit of a downturn in production, and so I think maybe that's a little bit rich, but if Justin Jefferson ever misses any time, Jordan Addison, I think, can be one of those wide receivers that wins you fantasy weeks, and so he is still a top 36 guy for us. We do have Rashee Rice as the number one wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, we know the legal implications are still looming around Rashee Rice, but when he is on the field, we believe that he is going to be their number one wide receiver. So he comes in at 28, but that value I think will go up as he sees the field this year. George Pickens at 27 feels a little bit low after I did my projections. To be completely honest, I was a little bit lower on him. I have since updated my rankings, but he comes in at 27. I think that he could finish inside the top 12 this year. And so I think that's one of those players where you're going to see a bit of a value spike, but we do have him here at 27. Jeremiah Smith, I mentioned him in the vein of Micah Hudson, but Jeremiah Smith is one of the nastiest incoming freshman wide receivers I've ever seen. Dude wins at every level. He's got insane footwork for a guy his size. We talk about him as if he's Julio Jones, and maybe you can get yourself in trouble doing that, but also he looks like Julio Jones. So I think that's a wide receiver that could be approaching that top 12 as we get to the end of his first college football season. So something to note, that's a down the road type of Devy guy. If you're involved in Devy leagues, of course, you know who Jeremiah Smith is, but if you don't, you should. He might end up being the number one wide receiver for Ohio State as a true freshman. Let's get into 24 through 13. Jackson Smith-Njigba comes in at 24. T. Higgins at 23. Tank Dell at 22. Nico Collins at 21. Tet McMillan from Arizona at 20. 19 is Michael Pittman Jr. 18 is Luther Burden from Missouri. 17 is Tyreek Hill. 16, Devontae Smith. 15, DJ Moore. 14, Roma Dunze. I'll talk about that. And then 13, Brandon Ayuk. So let's start with Jackson Smith-Njigba. There's a lot of people don't think he's very good because he had an iffy down year as a rookie last year, but he came into the season a little bit injured. He has a new offensive coordinator, and this offensive coordinator is one that gives the slot wide receiver a ton of targets. Jackson Smith-Njigba is projecting to be that slot receiver for the Seattle Seahawks. Ryan Grubb is a fantastic offensive schemer. We'll see if it translates to the NFL, but Jalen McMillan, who got drafted on day 2 this year, was a beneficiary of that Ryan Grubb offense. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba could overtake Tyler Lockett as soon as this year. In fact, I have him projected as the number one wide receiver for that team as far as fantasy points go. So to me, we're still high on him here. We were always fans of Jackson Smith and Jigba. That 1 year isn't really pushing us down. Obviously, a little bit. I think this time last year, we probably would have hoped that Jackson Smith and Jigba was inside the top 12, but he's still a wide receiver too for us. T. Higgins comes in down here. I think that there will be an opportunity for him to maybe be a number one elsewhere. I don't know if that helps or hurts, and I think that's why we always rank him in this range. I'm glad that Nico Collins is ahead of Tank Dell, if only because Nico Collins is a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. I think we're actually pretty low on him personally. Could be my fault. But Nico Collins is one of these guys that I think his value is going to skyrocket. People will be off of him because of Tank Dell being back healthy, because of their introduction of Stephon Diggs into this lineup. I don't think it matters after watching the film. I'm writing an article currently where I break down, which wide receivers to draft. Nico Collins is that number one guy pretty comfortably. He can beat any type of coverage. He looks like young AJ Brown still in development. So I think he's going to be one of those skyrocketed type of players after the season. Could be wrong, but that's where I am landing on Nico Collins. Tet McMillan, we've talked about him a few times on this channel. So if you haven't, you can go check out our Arizona preview. We talked through Tet versus Luther, which is an interesting breakdown. They're 2 spots away in our consensus dynasty rankings, combined dynasty rankings. But Tet and Luther are the 1 and 2 of this class. Luther reminds me a bit of Jamar Chase. Tet McMillan reminds me a bit of Mike Evans. And so when you have 2 players that have similar skill sets like that, or similar to those guys, you can project them forward pretty easily. Tet McMillan is a really good route runner for a guy his height. He's a little skinny, but he still, is physical enough. I think he can win at the catch point. I think he's an underrated yards after the catch player. He's got really good suddenness. He looks every bit as good. He reminds me of Drake London as well, who has kind of underperformed, but we're still high on him here as well, as you haven't seen his name just yet. Luther Burden is more of a yak threat, but I don't think that's taking anything away from Tet McMillan either. These are 2 very, very good prospects that should be drafted probably inside the top 12 to 15 in the NFL draft in 2025. So just something to consider with those 2 wide receivers at 20 and 18. Michael Pittman Jr. is down a little bit, if only because with Anthony Richardson hopefully healthy this year, I think there will be more running aspects to this game, whether that means Anthony Richardson pulling the ball down or whether that means just making it easy, giving the ball to Jonathan Taylor. Michael Pittman Jr. is still a fantastic wide receiver, though. I'm around this area for his 2024 projection, so this makes sense to me. You also talk about Adonai Mitchell being there now, Josh Downs having some really good chemistry with Anthony Richardson when they've been on the field together. So those are 2 things that factor into Pittman Jr. being a little bit lower than I think what consensus would say. Tyreek Hill, just the age thing. We know he's going to be a really good wide receiver, but we tend to look at these things in a 2 to 3 year window as we're doing our dynasty rankings. So that's why he's down here. Devontae Smith just got that new contract, working alongside AJ Brown, but has shown the ability to be a top 16 wide receiver. We might even be low on him, depending on the year for the Eagles. I'm curious to see what that new offense looks like. DJ Moore and Rome Odunze being ahead of DJ Moore, I think has to be an age thing. Or Rome Odunze being ahead, Rome Odunze being ahead of DJ Moore has to be an age thing because DJ Moore, underrated player. They introduced Keenan Allen to this offense as well as Rome Odunze, so we'll see if he's able to keep up what he did last year, mainly with Justin Fields. But DJ Moore and Caleb Williams have been working together for a very long time. Keenan Allen got into that mix as well. Rome Odunze was out there working too. But when you start to distribute the targets, I talked about how the slot wide receiver does get a lot of targets in that Ryan Grubb offense. It didn't necessarily get that in the Shane Waldron offense. So to me, DJ Moore being that traditional X or Z wide receiver, he's an X to me. I think that he's going to be the top target getter for the Bears this year, and so I think his value could start to creep up a little bit as well. They might eat into each other, and maybe I'm a little too bullish on DJ Moore this year. I have him inside my top 12 for fantasy finishers in 2024. But to me, Rome Odunze is a really good long-term asset. I'm not like hating on where we have Rome Odunze. It's just I think we might have to wait at least a year to see that truly come to fruition. Brandon Ayuk here at 13. This is interesting because the 49ers have clearly made moves to maybe transition away from Brandon Ayuk. However, I don't think that that's the smart move. I think moving away from Deebo Samuel as he gets older is certainly the way to do it. Get rid of that contract so that you can afford Brandon Ayuk. If they're able to get an extension done, Brandon Ayuk is one of the top 10 wide receivers in the NFL pretty comfortably. He and Nico Collins kind of vaulted into that range last year for me. And so Ayuk is you could probably argue top 6 or 7 with just how physical he is, how fantastic of a route runner he is. He's just been dynamic every time he touches the ball. It hasn't always translated to fantasy success because of how the 49ers offense is structured. However, I think that this is the right ranking for him. Our top 12, 12 Jalen Waddle, 11 Drake London, 10 Chris Olave, 9 A.J. Brown, 8 Puka Nacua, 7 Malik Neighbors, 6 Garrett Wilson, 5 Marvin Harrison Jr., 4 Amon-Ra St. Brown, 3 CeeDee Lamb, 2 Jamar Chase, and 1 Justin Jefferson. This is an interesting group because we don't have any college players. We don't have any Devy players inside our top 12 because we have such good production at the top and we're projecting growth from a few more of these guys. So Jalen Waddle is one of those guys. He's starting to actually get on the older side, but as this offense transitions away from Tyreek Hill being so heavily used and into more Waddle taking that number 1 role, which I think can happen based on the talent, I think we're going to start to see those really, really big weeks for Jalen Waddle to where 12 looks a little low. But when you start to incorporate the age of him against some of these other guys that are in this group, it starts to get a little iffy. Drake London's one that has underperformed, as I mentioned, but we're still high on him. And now, especially with Kirk Cousins, I did a Drake London video specifically a couple months ago now, but I think he's a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy football this year. Kirk Cousins loves to feed the ball to his number 1. Some of the route concepts that Drake London succeeded on last year, he's going to continue to succeed on in this new offense. And those are the routes that Kirk Cousins likes to throw. So Drake London still hasn't hit his ceiling, still young. And so I think we might even be low on Drake London when the season comes to an end. Chris Olave is one where fantasy football social media is freaking out about how he's being drafted as a wide receiver 1. But when you look at the production over the first 2 years, and I mean, you compare it with Garrett Wilson, for example, I think you're justified to maybe put Chris Olave as a wide receiver 1. There is certainly some doubt with Derek Carr leading that offense, but I do think the new offensive coordinator there is going to help this out. I think Chris Olave has every shot to finish as a wide receiver 1 this year, and long term, I think he's a really good piece. A.J. Brown down at 9, I think, is more speaking to his age again as he's starting to get a little bit older there. I still think he's dominant. I still think that he can be one of those guys that gets you 20 points a week in PPR formats. We'll see. Physical wide receivers like that rely so heavily on their athleticism can sometimes start to fall off earlier. I don't think that's coming for A.J. Brown anytime soon, which is why I'm comfortable with him inside our top 12. Puka Nacua, interesting one. You watch the film and there are certainly aspects of that are tied to Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay creating a dynamic offense. That said, those two things don't look like they're changing. Matthew Stafford looks like he's got 2 to 3 years left. Sean McVay seems to have a reinvigorated mindset and doesn't flirt with retirement as much anymore. So Puka Nacua looks like a really, really solid fantasy asset up inside our top 10. Malik Neighbors being ahead of him is a little shocking, especially with his landing spot. However, this is just speaking to how dynamic we think Malik Neighbors can be. When we were going through the draft process, I was struggling not to compare him to Antonio Brown with his acceleration and his ability to stop and start. I think if we get that level of impact as a rookie, I think, man, this could end up being low for Malik Neighbors as well. Garrett Wilson's down at 6, but there's every shot that he finishes inside the top 3 to 5 this year and kind of moves a little bit further up. Marvin Harrison Jr. has always been a top 5 receiver for us since our rankings dropped. Amon-Ra St. Brown's probably a little bit low here because from a volume perspective, I think you can make an argument that Amon-Ra St. Brown and CeeDee Lamb should be the 1 and 2. But when you talk about what Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase have already done on a per game basis over the course of their careers, it's really, really tough not to think of those two as the number 1 and number 2 in Dynasty. These things do change, though. CeeDee Lamb last year looked like he probably should be the number 1 wide receiver in Dynasty. So these things can change, but this is kind of how our top 36 land. We do have rankings available for, oh gosh, I don't even know how many players we have ranked anymore. We also just incorporated a new trade calculator. So we have player values on all of these players now. And so you can look at exactly what we've got going here. So this is from an article that we wrote on our Substack as well, but we're doing trades every once in a while. This is how the calculator would have it. So if you're interested in having a Devy or Dynasty trade calculator, you can subscribe to our Patreon, patreon.com/DevyRoyale. You can find all of our rankings there. You can find that trade calculator. It's only $5 a month to get access to those two things. So make sure you check that out, see if you're interested. If not, that's okay. If so, we appreciate the support. So head to patreon.com/DevyRoyale. Thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you on the next video.